Wellness Center where I'm presenting to you live today. And you right now, you see my screen. This is my PowerPoint presentation from July 11th that we're redoing because just of some technical difficulties that we had back then. I'm so happy you can join me today. This is our monthly program, Ask the Dietitian, and today's topic, as you can see on your screen, is global cuisine. So thank you for being here. So today I'm going to move rather quickly because we have a lot of questions that our participants asked about this topic. So I'm going to list them and provide my answers as I go through them on the PowerPoint, and then additionally offer some resources and recipes that might help you apply this information in a practical way, or allow you the opportunity to explore some trustworthy resources on your own. So let's get to those questions right away. So I thought it would be a great place to start here. Are there any that are particularly good for you in terms of these global flavors? In order to answer that question, I just want to remind everyone my understanding and also what the experts recommend in terms of the way we approach nutritious eating, particularly for cancer protection. The best way to do that is a visualization like you see here, a healthy eating plate. And what this does is it's a template and it allows us to have some flexibility with our food choices. So you get to decide, and partnering with a dietitian might be a step you need to take in order to help you understand what might be best for you, but it gives you that template. And you decide which whole grains, which vegetables, which fruits, and also some healthy proteins to include as part of your regular meals. And ethnic flavors provide interesting interest to your nutritious diet as well. So that's a little bit of what we'll explore today as well. But here's a great template. And hopefully what you're noticing about it is that half of the plate is fruits and vegetables. That's a pretty great start right off the bat, right? Lots of vitamins and minerals in there, also high in fiber. And many people I work with, although typically most American meals are pretty low in fruits and vegetables, right? And the overall diet is pretty low in fruit and vegetables. So I have a lot of work to do. We can experiment with different whole grains and even intact whole grains. So things like quinoa is a good example of an intact grain, very popular and trendy. But I think that's where people could really benefit in terms of increasing the fiber and the whole grain consumption in their diet, is exploring some other choices. And certainly I have lots of ideas, and you might learn of some today. And then some healthy proteins, they tend to be lean proteins, so things like fish and eggs and poultry, but also we can turn to our whole plant foods to find some great sources of protein as well. And I always like to refer to those foods as protein plus. So not only do they satisfy some of our protein requirements, but they also give us some other nutrients, important nutrients like fiber, as well as vitamins, minerals, phytochemicals, and antioxidants. So really great things to try. Now we can complement our meals with either low-fat dairy or dairy alternatives for additional nutrition, and then preparing our meals or using healthy fats in food preparation or in some of our condiments of choice, which really help to round out that plate. Now, here's some examples of like putting some global cuisine onto that plate and using that template. So I have circled here really what half of that plate looks like, right? I see a lot of fruits and vegetables. I see a lot of color. And we're exploring this in different ways, from Indian cuisine to Thai cuisine to some Mediterranean choices, Latin flavors, even some soul food on that slide there. So it really does help you understand that using that template, we can enjoy cuisine from all over the world and still satisfy the requirements for nutrition while eating some really yummy food at the same time. So that's a lot of fun. Hopefully that's helpful. Now, to answer the specific question, what are some of the best choices or the good choices, right? I'm going to talk more about the Mediterranean diet in just a moment, but it is one of the most researched diets, meaning overall food pattern, that demonstrates health benefits. So just stay tuned for that. But some other choices to turn to, certainly the Japanese cuisine. It's characterized by fresh seafood, which Americans do not tend to eat a lot of, but also rice and whole soy foods, as well as vegetables, and certainly some fermented choices. Some South Korean flavors, they also choose a lot of fermented foods. So when some people ask me about gut health and how to support their gut health, sometimes we will incorporate some really traditional choices in that category. The Nordic diet, if you have not heard of this, I'm going to reintroduce this to you. This was sort of a diet concept. it was like head to head with the Mediterranean diet about 10 or 15 years ago, and it sort of like fell out of favor. The Mediterranean started trumping it. But I'm going to talk a little bit more about the Nordic diet, and that's in the countries of Denmark, Finland, Iceland, Norway, and Sweden. And there's some health benefits based on research of the Nordic diet. And this is a plant-forward way of eating. It emphasizes fatty fish as well, but also berries, cruciferous vegetables, mushrooms, and low-fat dairy. And then, gosh, I've had Ethiopian, I've had the pleasure, and it's so deep rooted in terms of its traditional choices, and it's a lot of plant-based choices as well. And then West African cuisine is also plant-based with little sprinkles of fish in there as well. So some choices that may stand out to you, and I think really ultimately at the end of the day, I think whatever you decide you like and can do and you want to do is what's going to help you eat better. So if any of these like speak to you and serve to be inspiration, then that is probably the way to go. All right, so let's move on to the next question. How can I prepare Asian and Thai foods in a low sodium way? What a great question. So low sodium does not need to be bland and boring. So here's some great examples of pantry staples that you might even already have on hand, but also sort of lend to Thai and Asian cuisine. So vinegar, especially red wine vinegar, but I think of rice vinegars as well. Sesame oil, bonito flakes, they're available. We can use them in a lot of fun ways. Pickled ginger, tahini, lentils, shiitake mushrooms, cilantro, green onions, black rice. I think of especially what stands out to me there are the mushrooms because that gives us that umami flavor, which is sort of like this satisfying experience more so than salt gives us. So if you're looking towards umami, that might be a great opportunity for you to try as well. But I would say like pick any of these out and you can really notice that they're going to give you not only flavor, but different textures. I think of the black forbidden rice as a really good example. It's also visually just so appealing with that beautiful color on your plate. So I think those are ways to kind of tap into some different ingredients in order to reduce the sodium. Now, if you're ordering in or dining out, some other choices to think about as it relates to Thai choices are goi kun. Those are fresh spring rolls. You probably have had them or enjoy them. Yam mamuang, which is green mango salad, certainly satay. I would just watch the dipping sauce, maybe just a little less dipping sauce, but usually the satay itself is lower in sodium. And then I think of sam tum, which is papaya salad. So refreshing, right? Especially now with this weather that we're having. Coconut dishes in general, they tend to have less sodium. They're going to have a lot more calories and a lot more calories from fat. So there's always trade-offs that I want you to think about. But the coconut milk is what really provides the flavor in the dish. So there's less reliance on sodium and salt. I would say like actually I probably should start here, right? To control portions and just simply eat less right off the bat is one way to eat less of anything that you're wanting to eat. When you order out or dine in, if you request less, I think that certainly is a long way to go. Or you can do what this dietitian highly recommends, which is try some of these things in your own home and in your own kitchen. And could you make some really delicious dishes for yourself that you control the ingredients so you can automatically use less as well? Now, keep in mind that the overwhelming majority of the sodium that we eat in our diet typically comes from food that is consumed outside of our home. So even if we do take out, right, that's going to mostly be where our sodium comes from. So it's a really good opportunity for you to decide, hey, you know what? I do take out once a week. Nah, all right, I'm going to have a little more sodium on that meal, right? Or I do it 5 times a week, so let me do 2 of those meals at home and learn how to make some of these dishes myself. And then you can really kind of make some significant changes in a way that works for you. All right. This next slide has a handful of questions that I felt were similar, so I kind of lumped them together. Are there any global recipes you can recommend that are not too spicy? Someone indicated that the global flavors are too spicy. What are some more mild options? And then interested in trying Indian and Thai flavors, but tend to be a little more spicy, right? So do you have any recipes I might like? Really great questions. So these right off the bat, I was thinking of Thai and Indian dishes that tend to be a little more on the mild side. So some of them you may be familiar with. I'm bringing up, you probably have had or heard of pad thai, and you can almost always order a lot of these cooked or prepared in a mild way, so less heat, and you can make that request, right? Um, Same with cow pad, you'd probably have to order it mild, masaman curry, pad see ew, cow mun gai, that's poached chicken and rice, pretty bland, you know, and it's gonna have a lot of salt, I'm sure, but it's not gonna have that heat. Radna, which are wide rice noodles, and they have a more savory gravy, so think of that in terms of having less heat. Pla pao is grilled fish, again, that satay, tandoori chicken, biryani. I have someone I work with who makes biryani regularly, and he sends me pictures, and I'm like drooling just looking at it. It's so delicious. You've probably heard of paneer. That is definitely mild. Ildi or dosa with sambar and chutney. And I'm going to explain a little bit more about some of these, but you can certainly, just like reducing sodium, also make your own by reducing the amount of heat that you use or omitting the spices altogether that are spicy. You could turn towards dishes that add a cooling element. So good examples of that are da hi bat, which is basically like a yogurt rice, dosa, which is like a crepe or a crepe, uttapam, which is kind of like a savory pancake that's had for breakfast. So there's vegetables in there, so probably nutritious as well. Or you've probably heard of raita, which is like a yogurt and it's condiment. And a lot of times that yogurt was used specifically to cool off the heat, right, of the dish. And so if you turn towards some of those options, that might be a great way to enjoy while not burning your mouth. Tamarind chutney is more mild than green chutney, just FYI. Cumin and chaat masala in terms of the spices are more mild than red chili. So again, like if you see a recipe and you're learning to try to make something in your own home, could you use those flavors or, you know, increase the amount of cumin or chaat masala that you use so that you can appreciate the flavor without the heat. Pomegranate, and I love the idea of pomegranate seeds, that adds a lot of texture, but also a little touch of sweet, right? And it's cooling and refreshing. With Japanese, Cantonese, Vietnamese, Filipino, and most European cuisine, especially that Nordic diet, we're going to talk about in a moment, French cuisine, Cuban, Dominican, and Puerto Rican cuisines, they tend to be a little more mild. So I think if those kind of speak to you, you certainly could turn, I think Thai and Indian is really the most spicy foods in the world, right? So those might be some other global options to consider. And again, I mentioned the Nordic diet, so I want to talk a little more about that. This sort of characterizes what's on the Nordic diet, these dark and hearty rye breads, as well as some other grains and cereals. They have a lot of preserved seafoods because that's basically that they used the weather and I guess the climate to refrigerate. So they used basically they had a lot of preserved foods as well. So summer berries, root vegetables. I mentioned mushrooms in the previous slide and cruciferous vegetables. They have some fermented dairy in their diet, seeds, and then the herbs, parsley, dill, mustard, horseradish, and chive, which also have a little kick, right? Now, some of their meals might look like this. They might have smørrebrød, which I showed in the first slide, and I have a recipe for that. It's basically like an open face sandwich on rye bread. And you could put anything that you want. Like the combinations are endless. It's right up my alley, if you ask me. They typically have that for breakfast, but you could have that for a snack or lunch or even dinner. You know, anything goes there. Muesli is one of my favorites, really nutritious, whole grains, and popular, right? We can buy muesli here or we can make our own. And then very commonly they have fish soup and they'll use things like salmon or cod or haddock in their fish soup, and it tends to be a little more creamy in terms of the meal composition. Now, the Nordic diet itself, just like the Mediterranean diet, was researched at one point, and they were interested in how it might help protect against some of our chronic disease risks like cardiovascular disease or type 2 diabetes. And it does seem to have some of the components that are anti-inflammatory. So I think if those are things that you might have concerned or are concerned about medically, if you're looking towards diet to make some improvements besides the Mediterranean diet, you may see that some of the choices and some of the foods in the Nordic diet kind of parallel the Mediterranean, might be something for you to also pursue. Moving on, so along the lines of Nordic, my 100% Swedish mother used cardamom for Swedish recipes, like cardamom bread. at Christmas time. I always looked forward to it. How is it used and what types of foods is it used in Indian cuisine? Cardamom. What an interesting spice. So it is known as the queen of spices. Did you know that? And it comes in a lot of different forms. You probably have seen it in the grocery store, or if you're lucky enough to have a spice shop nearby, you can buy the pods, which is you see the green pods on the far left of that picture. You could buy the seeds, which are inside those pods, or you can buy a ground. Most people probably have a ground in their spice rack. So it is a spice that, again, is consisting of the pods, the seeds, and plants, and it belongs in the ginger family. The pods can actually be used whole, or they can be crushed, and that's what releases the seeds or ground into a powder. It's super versatile, so it has been used in you'll find it in a wide range of different recipes, both sweet and savory choices. And it's also a component in some very popular spice blends like Baharat and Garam Masala. So if you're thinking Indian right off the bat, Garam Masala, you're going to use that cardamom for sure. So the flavor of cardamom can be quite strong. So just a little heads up, a little bit goes a long way. And if you're new to it, I would just start with a little bit to try it first and then go from there. All cardamom starts as a pod and then contains the seeds, and they're used. And if you're going to use the pods, that's historically been used to kind of infuse flavor into things. So whether you bloom it in oil or you add it to a cooking broth or some other kind of cooking liquid, or you toast the seeds themselves before adding them to something else, that's been a way of using the pod, which is kind of cool. The seeds themselves are dried and they are sold whole, or we can buy the ground powder version of those seeds. Some people like to buy the seeds if they know they're going to be using a lot of cardamom because it's sort of like black peppercorns. You can grind them yourself. And when you do that, you're going to get more flavor out of it than buying the pre-ground cardamom, which I shared here. So what happens is the cardamom seeds like have an oil that gets released. And so oils are something that have like a shelf life, right? So we want to have them preserved as much as possible inside the seed if we know we're going to try to use that cardamom often. And we can grind it ourselves. It is versatile, as I shared. It's used in soups, cakes, puddings, curries, hot cereals, even in wine. So here's some traditional recipes, especially Indian ones. So chana masala. If you haven't heard of it, I encourage you to try it. It's delicious. You can probably make it yourself, and it combines chickpeas with cumin, coriander, cardamom, tomatoes, and tamarind. Kheer is something sweet. It's a rice pudding dessert, and it's infused with cardamom and garnished with nuts. Masala chai is cardamom tea. You might have heard of that. So you can actually boil some black tea leaves and then crush some green cardamom pods and then add in some other spices if you like. And then masaman curry is cardamom alongside with other spices like cinnamon, cloves, cumin, nutmeg, and mace. And it's the key ingredient in making a curry paste, which all sounds so delicious. But those were the top recipes or meals that kind of came to my mind that I think you probably easily can access or make for yourself, which would be even better in my opinion. All right, so this next person I think submitted like 8 questions. So I divided them in a handful of different slides and I'm going to try to tackle them all at once. But here's where I want to like engage you, the audience, and I'm going to flash a picture and I want you to guess what it is, what ingredient I'm referring to. So my thoughts on the following items: buckwheat, burdock root. It's said to support digestion and reduce inflammation, to be an antioxidant. It helps blood sugars, the Ayurvedic diet, and then adding goji berries and jujubes to teas or soups to reduce inflammation. Okay, so what is this grain here? Technically, it's not a grain, it's a pseudo grain and it's buckwheat. So hopefully most of you were aware of that one. Despite its name, it's not a wheat or a grain at all. Buckwheat is like one of the more planetary friendly pseudo grains out there. It protects our soil from erosion because it has a very deep root system and it's often plowed under. So farmers will use it as a form of compost. So that improves the nutritional composition of the soil. How great is that? I'm a fan of buckwheat. It has been shown to have prebiotic benefits. So prebiotics are the fuel for the beneficial microbes that live in our gut. And when we're feeding them, they become happy. And then we have a happy gut, which is good for the rest of our body. Buckwheat itself is a great source of plant protein. It also has fiber, a lot of it, riboflavin and niacin, and also an excellent source of magnesium. So all really good stuff inside this little package. It forms the backbone of many traditional dishes, so and across the globe, right? So from things like buckwheat flour in order to make a Korean, I think this is a pancake, naengmyeon. I've never had it, but pizza cherry from Italy, crepes in France, and then kasha, right? You probably have heard of kasha, very popular. That's found traditionally in Eastern Europe. Okay, next, what is this hand holding? That looks interesting, right? What could that be? Well, that's burdock root, also known as gobo, and it grows wild and it's regarded as a weed. It's cultivated in most parts of the world, like Japan and Europe. It's safe to eat as food, but when it's used as a supplement, we don't really know about any other information about its effects. And I just added that because sometimes I've actually worked with people who have found it in supplement form, and I tend to recommend against that. But again, that is a decision based on an individual consultation or a discussion with your healthcare provider. It's traditionally been used as medicine to help relieve cold and cough symptoms, as well as acting like a diuretic. It also is a prebiotic. It has a lot of fiber, but it has inulin, which you may have heard of. That is a type of prebiotic. And again, that feeds our beneficial microbes in our gut. Happy gut, happy body, right? We want to treat burdock root like a root vegetable. So it could be roasted, it could be stir fried, it could be braised, it could even be deep fried as chips, right? Yum. I've never tried it. I'd love to. Moving on to Ayurveda. It's an ancient Indian practice that prioritizes creating harmony among the mind, the body, and the environment. A core part of this philosophy is the idea that our energy patterns, or what are known as doshas, can be balanced through mindful dietary choices, also known as the Ayurvedic diet. So it recognizes that we all are unique and we all have different dominating doshas. There's 3 doshas, and therefore require different foods to balance our doshas. Now, I am not trained in Ayurvedic medicine or in the diet, so I could not really speak to this, and I don't think I have the time today to really get into this type of information. So I just wanted to kind of give you the highlights of what I understand about Ayurveda. In terms of the diet itself, it sounds really healthy. It sounds like, it's emphasizing whole, fresh, and easily digested foods for most people, no matter what their dominating dosha is. It promotes mindfulness when eating, as well as aligning individual needs for optimizing digestion. So it might be something to explore. I certainly know that we do that here. We have a lot of mindfulness-based programs here, and I explore mindful eating with people that I work with and in groups here as well. So if that's something that interests you, stay tuned for more because we certainly will be talking more about that, I'm sure. Okay, what is this image? Now what am I showing you? These are goji berries. So they're also known as wolfberry, and it's a sweet fruit from the Lycium barbareum or Lycium Chinese family. It's used in traditional Chinese medicine as tonics, tinctures, and powders. It treats everything from inflammation to nosebleeds to poor vision to anemia in traditional Chinese medicine. Like, what did it not do? What we know about goji berries are that they have carotenoids and as well as polysaccharides. And polysaccharides are a type of starch that are resistant, also help to feed the gut, really makes for a happy gut. Those carotenoids have potential anti-inflammatory as well as anti-proliferative properties, which is cancer protective. The dried berry is where I usually see them available as the dried berry choice, and it's super versatile. So I've used it myself in things like oatmeal or making like a oatmeal bar. They're great on top of a salad or like a grain mix, or if you make a trail mix, or if you're making smoothies or in a smoothie bowl, they're great things to experiment with. They have like a subtly sweet tart flavor. So I think if you see it and you find it, give it a shot. You'll be eating globally and in a nutritious way. All right, so second set of questions from this particular participant. Fresh moringa leaves, nigella seeds, fenugreek seeds, and then miso are fermented products like miso really healthy to consume on a daily basis? All really good questions. All right, so what is this? What is this herb? This is moringa. It's also known as the tree of life or miracle tree, and it has a spinachy taste. I've never had it. It's a tree native to India. The leaves, the seeds, the bark, the roots, the sap, and the flowers are all consumed either as food or used in traditional medicine. And it has some really interesting properties based on what I understand. So, but even though the research is not, it's only little about amount of research that we have. The cell culture and animal studies that we do know of suggest that it has many potential activities that could benefit us, whether it be antioxidant, anti-diabetic, meaning like helping control blood sugars, anti-lipidemic, meaning helping control our blood cholesterol levels, antihypertensive, anti-ulcer, anti-cancer, antimicrobial, anti-inflammatory, and immunomodulatory. So if you can find it and you want to enjoy it in traditional ways, I'm all for that because it looks like it's a good choice based on what we know of it. Okay, now what are these? This is the Nigella seeds, and the Nigella sativa is an annual flowering plant native to Western Asia and Eastern Europe. And the flavor has notes of onion, oregano, and black pepper. Hippocrates and the Greek physician Dioscorides used it in order to treat way long ago, like ancient medicine, right? To treat headaches, flu, toothaches, and intestinal parasites. Imagine having to deal with that back then. Thank goodness. Contains thymoquinone, which has antioxidant properties. So really interesting component to that. Now it is in Panch Phoron, which is also known as Bengali five spice or Indian five spice, and it's a spice blend. And so it's used traditionally in some regional Indian and Bangladeshi cuisines as well as Bengali cuisine. I love the idea of spice blends because I think what it does is give you like this synergy of all the different spices that are in it. And, we are, again, if you're in an area where you might be able to frequent a spice shop, you might see some of these spice blends already available and they're freshly made and they might be worth trying for yourself if you really, because a little bit's going to go a long way here. And I think a really easy way of doing this is just even taking like roasted vegetables and putting on like this five spice and even something bland like potatoes. And will really elevate, right, that flavor and probably that nutrition as well. So it might be worth a shot. Okay, next image. What am I showing you here? So this is fenugreek, and it's a clover-like herb that's native to the Mediterranean region. It's used as a remedy historically for menstrual cramps, for menopausal symptoms, even for kidney stones, and it's been used as a laxative. Research suggests that it may lower blood sugar levels. The seeds smell and taste like maple syrup, but it actually has like a hint of a bitter flavor, which is really kind of fun if you ask me. Something that smells and tastes different. That's really fun. Fresh leaves are folded into curries, and I think that's what the participant was asking about this. Could I use fenugreek that way? That's how the leaves in Indian cuisine they fold it into the curries that they make, and also in the flatbread methi tepla. And dried fenugreek is used in some of their other prepared dishes. So butter chicken, very popular dish, right? Or in some of the teas that they make. So those are traditional uses. Fenugreek is pretty versatile. And, just like I was suggesting with the Bengali five spice, if you want to try fenugreek on some roasted potatoes, like that's such a great, it's like the gateway, right? Like you could start there and then see if you like it, and then you can expand from there. Lentils are another great application for using fenugreek. So might be something that elevates something that you're used to having and taking it to the next level. Okay. Now we're going to end on, of course, we're going to end in the gut with this one. So this is miso, and that's white miso specifically. So miso is a fermented soybean paste in much of Japanese cooking. How they make it is they ferment steamed soybeans with salt grains, and it's usually like a rice or a barley, and then koji, which is a type of fungus. That sounds appetizing, right? Well, it is actually. It's very delicious. Talk about umami. Miso is one way to get umami. So there's different types of miso, and a good rule of thumb is that the darker the color of the miso paste, the saltier and stronger the flavor is because it was fermented for longer. So it really adds a really deep flavor. For most people who have never used miso, I recommend starting with the white miso and then seeing if you like it and going from there. Surveys suggest that 3 out of 4 people living in Japan eat miso soup every single day. Wow. And they might even eat it more than once a day. Now, research also suggests that when someone eats a lot of potassium in their diet, for example, things like spinach or seaweed like wakame, and they're eating a lot of calcium-rich foods like dried sardines or dried bonito flakes, and they're eating a lot of magnesium, which we might find in whole soy foods, some seaweed, this actually helps manage our blood pressure, and especially in someone who's salt sensitive. So when we worry about salt, I want you to think about, yes, we probably don't want to over consume too much salt, especially from foods that are very highly processed and not very nutritious. But if we're using a little hint of salt in something that's got a lot of flavor, and we're combining this as part of a diet or even just within a meal that has a lot of other nutrition, there's going to be some balance there. And it's probably it's going to pan out okay for us, right? So keep in mind there's this interaction, and we always want to think the whole diet pattern. So when we're eating a lot of potassium, a lot of calcium, a lot of magnesium, and I should actually clarify that when we're eating enough, most Americans don't eat enough. We don't eat enough potassium. We don't eat enough magnesium. We probably cut it close with calcium too. So when we focus on eating more of those foods, then we can get away with having a little higher sodium foods as well. Okay, now if that seems daunting or overwhelming, that's what a dietitian can help you understand better in a more practical way. Okay, so back to miso and back to fermented foods. Should we eat them daily? Well, I think a little bit and regularly is better than consuming a large amount once a week, because we actually need to consistently think about this as a habitual thing. If we're constantly giving fuel to the beneficial microbes in our gut, then they're going to be happy. They're happily fed. And then they become quite active in ways that benefit our body, not just locally in the gut, but also systemically. So I like to recommend thinking of diversity, because as it turns out, diversity, even within fermented choices, so from miso to kimchi to things like kefir, now you're really diversifying the amount of live active cultures that you're obtaining in your diet and delivering to your gut. Kimchi is a good example of a diverse fermented choice because it contains plenty of ingredients that act as fertilizers for the microbes. I love that. So I think that's like the classic example of a fermented choice. That's a great one to have regularly. Diversity can also be achieved, as I was sharing, by consuming think variety. So not only just kefir, but yogurts, fresh sauerkraut, fresh kimchi as well. And you're going to get that diversity, which makes for a happy gut. Okay, this is the last section of this participant's questions. Summers when I frequently eat salads, what is the best vinegar to use? I love rice, but I'm worried about the metals in it, like specifically arsenic is what I think she was asking. So let's talk about that. So vinegar. So vinegar is a product of double fermentation. The process starts with alcohol, such as wine or cider, and all vinegars are fermented with a carbohydrate. So usually they use something like fruit, or they might use rice. When the alcoholic beverage is exposed, based on that fermentation process, to the bacteria in the air, it's fermented again over time and acetic acid forms, and that's what gives vinegar its tangy, acidic taste. All vinegars, every single one, thanks to the acetic acid, have been shown to be anti-inflammatory and help lower our blood sugars and cholesterol. Isn't that refreshing? So we can use whatever vinegar we like. They're probably going to benefit us. So the other thing beyond that, I like, because I think people think apple cider vinegar is the #1 vinegar to choose. I'm giving you permission to have any of them. Sure, that's great. And I actually think it's quite delicious. But I think all of them are going to offer us benefit in one way or another. Now, balsamic and pomegranate vinegars contain polyphenols. So that's another bonus of using those two choices in some of your dishes. Apple cider vinegar with the mother actually contains those live active cultures. So look for that with the mother on the label of the bottle, and you might get some additional, I don't want to say probiotics because that's incorrect, but you'll get some live cultures into your gut. Okay, moving on to rice. So arsenic, it's a naturally occurring element in water and in the earth's crust, if you didn't know about that. And the way cultivated rice is grown, it's continually flooded, and it's more likely to absorb arsenic from the soil through its roots. And it's at a rate nearly 10 times that of other grains. Oops, I put that backwards. So children and those children under 5 who are the heaviest consumers of rice per unit of body weight are the most vulnerable to toxicity. So if that pertains to you, if someone you know in your life, I think that's the population I would zero in on and be most concerned about. Because for the rest of us, even at low levels, long-term arsenic exposure, even at low levels, long-term meaning years, that has been linked with multiple types of cancer. So skin, lung, and bladder, as well as cardiovascular disease. Good to know. Okay, so this is kind of like, wait a second here. Acute arsenic poisoning is not a concern though, because we would know it. So chronic low levels exposures is where we're sort of concerned about. So if we're doing this for years and years, probably decades, right, for most of our life. So how do we reduce arsenic? If we haven't been doing it yet, maybe now moving forward, we can start to. We want to thoroughly wash and parboil the rice. And that's going to significantly lower the arsenic content of that rice. Some rice companies here do that for us, and you'll notice that on the label. So that's a little refreshing, right? Now, a diversified diet, and I think of that especially for our children, means eating different grains than just rice. That can help us, right? So thinking diversity, that's automatically going to mean we're going to eat less, particularly from brown rice, which seems to be where most of the arsenic is contained. More research is needed in order to compare the levels of all the different types of rice. So we just don't know. I think a little bit is coming out. I hope more will come out. And as soon as it does, I will share that with you, what I know and understand. There may be less arsenic in wild rice because just simply by the way that it's grown, that's the theory. If you want to know more about this is from the FDA, and it's a campaign that they're calling Closer to Zero. And again, it's really narrowing in on the childhood exposure because that seems to be when things are the most problematic for risk. But if you want to apply these concepts to yourself as well, how to reduce exposure, so you might like this website, so Closer to Zero. So when you get these slides, you can just Google Closer to Zero FDA, and you can get that information for yourself as well. Okay. So benefits of blue zones. Great question. So the blue zones, if you haven't heard about them, they are 5 regions of the world where people live measurably longer, but not just longer, they live healthier. They're sort of like hanging out, having fun with the family and the community at large. So those, now you're wondering where they are in the world, right? So the 5 regions are Loma Linda, right here in the US, Nicoya in Costa Rica, Sardinia in Italy, Icaria in Greece, and then Okinawa in Japan. They have a very high quality of life, especially in older age. And the key lifestyle factors that seem to be a theme about the blue zones are that they eat a plant-based diet and they don't eat a lot of highly processed foods. They're not necessarily eating Oreos and Doritos every day. They are moving their bodies. They're walking around town. They're out in the garden. They're walking to visit their neighbors. They're taking care of neighbors. They're going to church on the weekends. You know, they're very active. And they also have a lot of strong social connections, like I just shared. They check in. They have a sense of community. They also have a sense of purpose and meaning, which turns out that's a good reason to wake up in the morning when you feel that way, right? So if you're a grandmother taking care of your grandchildren and you're teaching them some of your traditions, that seems to be a good thing for longevity. And, you know, because of the way that they live their life, and I also happen to think the gorgeous climate they live in, they don't have a lot of stress. Or the stress that they do have, they have ways of managing it. So again, because of social connections, because of movement, because of spirituality, a lot of those things seem to contribute. So if you're curious to learn more about them, There's a lot of information out there. There are books, there's cookbooks, there's websites, there's documentaries. I certainly think it's worthy of viewing to see, could you apply some of those elements to your lifestyle here? Okay, moving along. How about the Mediterranean diet? So the Mediterranean diet is characterized by a lot of plant foods. So fruits, veggies, whole grains, beans, lentils, herbs, spices. And they also use a lot of fresh pressed olive oil, a lot. They dump it on their meals, basically. So the benefits of the Mediterranean, from research, we see that there may be a lower risk for heart disease through lowering blood pressure and cholesterol levels. It may lower blood sugars. It's linked with a reduced risk for type 2 diabetes. It may lower the risk for breast and colorectal cancers. It's associated with improving cognitive function from reducing the risk of dementia and Alzheimer's disease. It may help in weight management, and it's probably good for gut health. So I wonder, like, what does the Mediterranean diet not do? It's very popular right now, still very trendy. It's consistently ranked as one of the best diets by nutrition and medical experts. I did a presentation on the Mediterranean diet. It's on our YouTube channel. I'm going to include a link in the resources in case you want to learn more about that. What about, again, how about making some flavor with less sodium, and how to replace cumin and curry with a different palate? And then loving ingredients, but allergic to cumin and curry plants. So that's a tricky one to answer. I think we need a chef on hand here. All right, so let's just start first with herbs, spices, and vinegars, and they're a great way to replace salt. So I could have added this to that other question asked earlier. The juice and the zest of lemons, oranges, and limes, or almost any citrus, they're going to intensify flavor, which is great because that's kind of what salt does, right? So that's a nice way to kind of play around with those citrus fruits and see if you can do that. For cold dishes, we're going to add our herbs, and any herb that you like, and our spice, any spice that you like, you're going to do that at the start of a cold dish and let that flavor build, right? With a little bit of time in the fridge. For hot dishes, crush your spices and your herbs and add it at the end of cooking. And that's going to lend in nicely for some flavor. So I added this because I think this might be helpful if you identify what it is that you're looking for. Like, do you like sour things? So could you go with some more vinegary choices, right? Or ingredients, right? If you like umami, tomato does it, right? So any version of a tomato. And you can really like lean on these for maybe some heat and spice if you like that. And it might just be a good guide for you to consider. Okay, for using specific ingredients for herbs and spices and vinegars. So what about cumin allergy? Okay, so I had to do a little homework on this one. Spices can sometimes, it's important to bring this up, spices can sometimes be contaminated with other allergens. So if you have a severe reaction to cumin, I would double check too with a cross reactivity, right? So are you allergic to other spices besides cumin? I would just double check. Maybe you already have, I hope. Okay, so cumin belongs to the Apiaceae family, which includes anise, fennel, and coriander. So good to know. Like those could be. I wonder, do you also have a reaction to those choices? I would be careful of that. Cumin itself, it's used in Mexican, Indian, and Middle Eastern dishes. It's a little slightly nutty and peppery. That's why it's so delicious. It brings depth and complexity to recipes. Coriander, caraway, and chili powder might be good substitutes. I think it depends on what you're cooking, right? Paprika and oregano can add a warm and smoky flavor if you're thinking Mexican dishes. Turmeric could add warm and earthiness to Middle Eastern or Indian. So hopefully that helps, because I think it's tough to really replace cumin, but those ideas for substitutions might be okay for you to try. I thought I did pretty good on that considering my lack of culinary experience. So hopefully you agree that that might be worth trying. Okay, we are ending here. So resources and recipes to share. If you're looking to eat less sodium and salt the plate, I wanted to share because I thought it was really, I don't know why she decided to call her website Salt the Plate, but it's really a great way of learning different flavor combinations and learning some ingredients to help you really harness flavor without relying too heavily on salt. Globally inspired recipes. I'm a big fan of the Budget Bites website. They have a whole category on global recipes. It's just such a comprehensive resource, Budget Bites. So you might, even if you're not looking for globally inspired content, you might like budgetbites.com. You're bound to find something that you'll enjoy. USDA has My Plate, sort of like that plate template I started the presentation with, and you could filter it by the cuisine. How cool is that? So you can really find recipes based on your preference. Now, Old Ways, the website oldways.org has a complete section with recipes, ingredients, how-tos, plans, you name it, all on the Mediterranean diet, plus others, but really the go-to resource for anything related to the Mediterranean diet. This is a fun game called Pick Your Plate. I promise you, I think it's from Southern, I forget which institution, but it's so fascinating to me. It was, you basically around the world, you have to try to choose cuisine, breakfast, lunch, dinner, and a snack to try to satisfy that country's recommendations for nutrition guidelines. And it's so fun. It has music and then it quizzes you. So if you're curious to learn more about global flavors and you're wondering what they eat in Australia and beyond, that's just one example of the many countries you can visit, and you can play this game and don't do it during work like I did, because you'll not be as productive. And then Meet the Mediterranean Diet. I promised I would share that. I did a presentation on the Mediterranean diet here at Cancer Wellness Center. It's on our YouTube channel, just like a lot of the other things that we record. So if you didn't get a chance to watch that, you can see it on our YouTube channel at your own leisure, and you might enjoy that. For those who registered, I almost always include a nice set of recipes for you to try. So hopefully you agree these are things that you will enjoy as well. That last one on the right is Campara Gobo, and that's that burdock root. So it's basically braised carrots and burdock root. So it's got this like sweet and salty spice. And if you can't find burdock root, I guess you can substitute something else in there, or just do all carrots or parsnips. The sky's the limit with something like that, but it gives you those flavors and something to try. Now our next Ask the Dietitian, I put the incorrect date. It's not next Friday, it's the following Friday. So it'll be August 8th. And we are having a great topic for that Ask the Dietitian, all about food and cravings. And I might be able to answer some of your questions related to how to manage cravings best, especially when dealing with cancer or being treated for cancer, and how to kind of cope with some of that. So hopefully you will agree that that sounds like a good topic, and you will join us then on August 8th. I'm going to stop my share here and see if there's anything else for anyone on that has any questions.
That was great, Lori. Thank you. We don't have any questions in the chat, so I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording. Thanks everyone on Facebook for joining us.
Thank you so much. We got through it on this lovely Friday.